Mysore. So it finds that this resonates even in the small towns. Right. So over to you.
I'm first very intrigued to know why the selection of these three faces for the book. I'm very flattered that to be sharing space with Meena Kumari, who's, who's an icon for all of us, but I've admired her deeply. And of course, I've loved Kajol. I also know her a little personally. But Meena Kumari, I was like, oh my God, why the selection of these three faces for the book?
I was actually struggling to come up with a cover idea. And here I must thank the person who's not here. I suggested to Shama and her son Dhruv, whom I know. They live here in Bombay, and I had bought her painting. And suddenly one Sunday morning, and OUP asked me, what do you want for the cover? I said, I want something symbolic, a figure of a woman who is free, like a flowing palla maybe, and then still working, rooted in the soil, but it didn't gel. The sort of things that they sent, I said, it's like very generic. It could be like in a textbook. I said, this book is about cinema. So I have to choose the actors, the icon, and also I wanted to suggest a kind of an evolution of the Indian woman from Meena Kumari, and Kajal is the bridge because the 90s cinema comes in there, and then the 20th century. I thought no one better than you for that. And so when I suggested the idea to them, so they came back, I said, we don't want portraits or we don't want actual photographs. Just, make it, because my theme was black and white with touches of red. So then they came, and I'm very, very happy. Sorry they couldn't be here because Dhruv got married a couple of days ago. So I can't expect the new groom and the new mother-in-law to come here for the function. So a big thanks to them. And I also want to say thank you to Radha Krishna Nair, my editor at Man's World, who was supposed to have come here today but couldn't. He allowed me to use a lot of material that I wrote for Man's World. So because sometimes you have written in the first flow of your response to your film, and you try to paraphrase the same idea in a different language, it becomes very pale copy of what it was in the first. It's like the first take that you do it comes out spontaneously well. So then I said, and my publishers agreed, that I said, I'll use my own material that was written for somewhere, so use it here. Especially, I think some of the things that I wrote about the dirty picture, some parts of it were there, but when I saw so many films again right now. So this was like, that was like suddenly, I think watching news in the morning on a Sunday morning, I said, why am I struggling with all abstract figures? This is a book about cinema, we have to have concrete actors on it. So that's and I said, like, evolution, show it in this kind of a triangle.
No, it's a lovely cover, and I love that dash of red.
Yeah.
It's just, I'll come to the book, but you said something very interesting, which is about today actors being both brands and brand ambassadors. What did you mean by that?
You see the advertisements. I mean, I watched, and in the book, in the introduction, I quoted Santosh Desai, who's a column that I write. I like and I read it. Then he talked about all this branding and the difference between the old advertising, Nirma advertisement he gives. So Manju, all the names, Jaya or something Nirma, Sabki Pasand Nirma, that song, the jingle was there. He says that is not resonating now in the new advertising. You need a star face who is endorsing a product, and she's also selling aspirations. And another thing with brand ambassador, I said, was one of the things that has made society open up now is advertisement always, I don't think it sets trends. Some advertising guru years ago when I met him, he said, advertising doesn't set trends, it catches the trend and then capitalizes on it. So for me, the example was the advertisements about sanitary pads, which was such a hush-hush thing all those years. Then there is anonymous ones of a mother talking to her teenage daughter and then saying that, you have to use the sanitary pads are really healthy and clean. That's what you give confidence to your daughter. Then came Anushka Sharma's advertisement I saw for this one. Forget about those days. I'll wear white and things like that. So, all these things built up that the brand is selling. She becomes the brand selling this, and she's also becoming the ambassador to sell an idea.
Right.
So that was the thing when I say she's both the brand, and I think in a way Bollywood has discovered the modern independent woman with a mind of her own as a brand to be promoted. I don't think they consciously pursued that, but I feel that they saw what was the kind of metro society around and found these women. So I think they also, gave agency to her. And then you see all the films that have come, rom-coms. You see the long ago Salam Namaste. You have set it in Australia. Then they are living together. And then, there's no family anywhere. Neither her family nor his family. The friends, the peers are the family who are influencing them. Then you had, then I think one of the films that came out from Yash Raj was Band Baja Barat, where again it's the girl who is the driving force in the film. So even in a rom-com where earlier she was just sidelined, the hero was more important. Look back to Shami Kapoor films and all that earlier, all the rom-coms that you had earlier, and this is so different. And there are live-in relationships in Shuddha Desi romance. Of all the places in a small town you think is very conservative, like in Jaipur. So that was something, that I said the rom-com is sort of run its course in Hollywood. And I believe the thing would be, if you run out of ideas for any film, chalo rom-com bana denge. Even they said, let's make a rom-com. But I think that also has evolved in Hollywood. I think it's evolving in Bollywood. And I think that there's a whole lot of films that I discovered which I hadn't seen then. So I saw those films. So I find that women get a say in a relationship, in determining the scope of a relationship. So that I thought was very significant.
But do you think we're becoming a little myopic in the sense that we're, the way we're judging female characters has actually, I think female characters are judged as severely now for the fact or through the prism of whether they are being feminist or not. I think the tables have turned. I don't know if I'm able to articulate this correctly, but previously I think they would get judged for whether they were good women or bad women, or they were victims or they were vamps or all of that. But now I think every character is being judged for whether she's feminist or not. And isn't that an unnatural expectation from every female character on screen? Because feminism is not one thing. I think feminism has to be also seen in the context of the world the story is being told in. Like, I'll never forget what one of my sociology professors said when I was studying at Xavier's. And she had said that for you, feminism is very different. Your rights, being aware of your rights and living your life on your own terms and making your choices, all of that constitutes who you are. But for a woman in a village who's lived in the parda or in the ghungat all her life, the first time she lifts the ghungat and walks, that is empowerment. That is, in that context, she is being a feminist. Yeah. So do you think we are going through a time when we are looking at it through a very myopic, having a very myopic view on this?
This is something when I used to write on the images of women, they used to say, is it a positive image or a negative image that's being produced? I mean, I'm talking of the films of the 80s and early 90s. So the whole thing was, is it a positive image that is being presented or a negative image? But my thing is, it's what is important is not positivity or negativity, but the complexity of a woman in a situation. So how she deals with it. You don't want a cardboard positive figure. You don't want a totally stereotyped vampish figure. She is a person with many challenges, and each individual has to go through a journey. So I feel that yes, maybe there is some kind of, as you said, myopic thing about, like in the dirty picture. So many people, I remember saying that towards the end, you still have the, you put the bindi, then you put on the red sari before you take this thing. So is there an innate wish in the rebel who took on the system on her own terms and uses, her weapon was her sexuality, her sex appeal. And then you made your way through a very patriarchal, male-dominated film industry. So when you do that...
No, but why does one have to... I'm saying, these are not exclusive, right? We are human beings. If we are really complex, even a woman like Silk, I'm saying, is allowed to have aspirations of having a partner, of being married. Why does it have to be so... so exclusive to one another? I'm really grappling with that, because I find that I don't read film reviews most of the time, not of mine for sure, not around the release because it's very stressful, but I'm saying even otherwise, when I do, the way films are being discussed, I think we're not we're not allowing for creative expression of telling of a story. There are all kinds of women, each story is different, each journey. I feel that we are actually stereotyping the modern woman to have, for every woman to have a voice, for every woman to be heard, which is why, I want to, I don't know if you've seen my film Sherni, but I thought it was a great example of a woman who was not aggressive in a male-dominated world. She was quiet, but she had her conviction. She went about not by thumping her fist or by making a big deal of things, but by quietly doing her job and by doing what she felt was right. So, it was refreshing for me to see that there was here, and let's not forget that the director is male. Amit Masurkar made the film. But his view was very, he could have, if he wanted to make a really, today's so-called feminist film, he could have chosen to make her a little more of a cardboard cutout forest officer. But he didn't, and I think those choices, to me...
You're very right, because as I said, that complexity of the situation, and as I said, each individual will have a journey. This I found that, you do tend towards being judgmental about the heroine's choices or their representation. That I think is like, very often depends on the filmmaker's skill. In the sense that, does he convey the complexity of the situation,
I think also
the complexity of the choices your woman protagonist has to make. I think that came out very well in Jalsa. Because you had negative shades in that, and your conscience is like, bothering you. Not just bothering, it's gnawing your at the soul. So when you show that kind of a conflict, I think that's where the film succeeds. It may not be a huge box office hit, but I mean that's the problem. You go deeper into a film's character and focus on the inner conflict. I think people can accept that in a book because it gives them the scope to take that inward. Because when you're seeing a visual medium, that's giving you a different message at times. So I think to convey the inner conflicts of a character in a film is far more challenging than in writing a book. And so that becomes dependent on the writing of the film, the way the film is narrated, and how deeply the protagonist understands that role and brings that out. It's a very challenging thing, I said. I mean...
no, because I keep thinking about this. I'm sorry, I keep going back to that because I feel that today, women are still judged in cinema.
Yes.
you know, previously it was to see whether you're a good woman or a bad woman, but today it is to see whether you're empowered, whether you're a feminist, whether you're independent enough by who, what yardstick are we using? You cannot use the same yardstick, and why does every woman have to be empowered on screen? Then we are only telling stories of a certain kind of, a certain, you know, group of women.
Yes.
There are women who still have to make that journey. There are women who may not yet have made that journey, may not have even set foot on that journey. I think we need to see reality from a more holistic perspective.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Because I think what is, you know, easier for even the, not just the filmmaker, even for a viewer, to see characters as stereotypes,
Yeah.
meeting a certain expectations, and the expectations keep changing with times. Now, because I feel that it's not just a feminism is taken for granted. Now we are living in a post-feminist age, in the sense that you redefine feminism not in the 80s standard of, you know, home doesn't, I mean, your personal life doesn't matter, like, you know, your work, your self-identity, how you find that. That became like when you read the female mystic, the feminine mystic, and all the 80s feminist literature, we have gone past that, because a lot of women themselves, they said, they take certain of the rights that are granted by, I mean, I'm talking about the educated, urban, middle class women. So they take the advantages, the rights that are implied by feminism as for granted. Then there is a thing beyond feminism to find, you know, don't discard your feminine part for the sake of feminism. So you can own both parts of you, and that is, I think, what I see in women in their 20s, late 20s and 30s, and there are other women who are just even coming to that first taste of liberation. For me, I felt that that happens for me in Door, when Aisha's character suddenly takes off her, you know, and then runs into freedom, and she's such a young woman, and what if she's been widowed, lost her husband, she died, but she's also fun-loving, and she finds that kind of freedom in the company with the other woman. And for me, the most significant part of Door was the old Dadi, censorious, in a way, very you know, judgmental about this girl, the young girl in the traditional setup. She gives her the key to the house to go out. That I thought was a really remarkable scene, you know. So that you know, this kind of a personal quest can happen in any situation, in any kind of a, and we are such a diverse country. And diverse country, not just language in this way, but each upbringing, there's always been this sudden a struggle between tradition, family values you're born with, and then you want to search for something beyond that, not being conformist. You know, and as I said in my book, conformists are born, non-conformists are born, they're not created. When you try to create a non-conformist in film, it somehow sounds false. You know, even being a non-conformist has to be part of that character, not just the character on the screen, but even the actor playing the role. So, you know, so these are like complex kind of issues, which I think what happens in popular cinema especially is that you're trying to make it something that the audience will not take too much trouble to question, and be entertained at the same time. And what do you take away from that? So I think when you're saying that each woman is judged whether she's being feminist enough, that itself becomes a judgmental thing. You know, I think we have to accept a story as it is told. I mean, so, you know, this is always the thing with when you're a being film critic. You're taking a genre film, you're taking a modern rom-com. Then you can't compare it with, you know, some other set idea of how it should be in your mind. You might have seen a whole lot of films, but you can't judge this film on its own merits, what it set out to do, and whether it has succeeded in doing what it set out to do. think that's the first basic premise, at least I set for myself, when I'm seeing a film and then forming my reaction to it.
Yeah. You, you know, I was about to say something and I forgot.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Talk about Jalsa. I found it a very intriguing and a very reflective film in a very quiet way.
You know what was fascinating for me about Jalsa was the fact that it could have been a man in her place.
Yes.
And he would have gone through the same quandary. So it was not gender specific. Her gender did not determine her reactions, or that for me was very freeing. Just to read as material and then to play that on screen, because yes, she's already, when you see her, she's already an empowered woman who's living life the way she wants to. But you know, a situation like this can make you extremely vulnerable. And that's, like I said, it doesn't matter what gender you identify with. You know, this is very human. This is a human quandary. I found that absolutely amazing, and I think that's where I hope someday, you know, I think as women begin to take charge of their lives more and more and more, and I feel that that's where cinema will go, you know, where we're not necessarily we're not pigeonholing women's roles into just being women roles, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
You know, we need to open up the canvas. It needs to get more expansive and free, and that for me would be truly liberating. So I think that's what fascinated me most about Jalsa. But please do ask whatever you wanted to. Sorry, I just went off on my...
No, I mean, when an actor chooses a role, what, you know, because I have an actor like you, and so this is a little beyond what is there in the book.
Right.
So I just want to know what attracts you to a role, the script, or your role in it, or what exactly hooks you to that?
This human dilemma, you know, because I have to tell you, Maithili, that I was offered this film before the pandemic, and I had said no. Because I said I would never walk away from a situation like that. But the pandemic happened, and suddenly I began to look at the world and myself very differently. You know, and now I realize that I don't know what I'll do until I'm faced with a situation. There was a certain humbling, I think, that the pandemic caused in us. And that's when one day when I was speaking to the writer-director Suresh Triveni, he said he'd made some changes to it. And I said, I'd like to read it. And he said, really? Because I'd already said no. But I read it, and this time I connected with it because I saw how it's about human frailty, right?
Yeah.
And for me, exploring something like that is very exciting. Because it's very easy to say that, it's very easy to judge someone else in that situation. But what would you do if you had a child at home and you were the only caregiver for that child, and you have a mother, but that's your world, right? You know that you have to protect it fiercely. And now you feel that everything will fall, and he's a special needs child. So everything will fall apart if you're arrested, or your life will just come crumbling down. So what would you do? And there were no clear answers. I thought the way it was structured, the way, you know, she's initially in denial, and then there's wanting to shove this under the carpet, and then there's guilt which consumes her, which makes her angry, therefore, because this is a reality. She knows that it's a secret. She can't keep secret for too long. And then finally the acceptance of it. And, you know, I thought in both characters,
Yes.
I think the juxtaposition of both women's lives was really, it made the film what it is, you know. And there is no way of knowing, you know, in terms of numbers, how a film does when it releases on OTT. But I have to say that it was amongst the 10 most watched films on OTT last year. So that's very heartening. You know, when you know that even these kind of films
Yeah.
are being lapped up by people.
So for me, I think this kind of exposure to other kinds of film narratives and filmmaking, I think will change even popular taste and make them accepting of more challenging, say, stories that don't give very easy answers.
Yeah.
But what happens is you want to give easy answers to make the viewer go back with some message that is very easily internalized or take home with a sense of comfort. I think that has its own place, but the most exciting part of filmmaking would be these challenging kind of stories that you tell, where you're not seeing a character just as a woman or as a man, but first of all as a human being, and then grapple with situations. Maybe in a very hopeful future we can go to that, but you can't escape the kind of burden that a woman carries in our society.
And I don't think we should either, I don't think we've reached that stage where we've even acknowledged the burden.
Yeah.
So why, I think we mustn't, my point was not that we mustn't acknowledge or we mustn't confront that, but that, I think my only point is that even in wanting all of the women to be liberated, that is also, limiting her.
Yes, I mean you're limiting her choices. You're making the choices for her, like a predestination.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not. That's why I think I like Thappad. I like Thappad because of that. She chooses to be a homemaker.
Yeah.
And it's of her own volition.
Yeah.
She has another choice to do. But then everyone says it's mere Thappad and you're walking out on a marriage. But then it's not done in a very, I mean, there are parallel stories that I think sometimes take away from the main story, but they also add to it. So that's why, a woman has the right to feel so insulted and stop respecting the man for slapping her in public. And everyone says, and then everyone says,
no,
even
public
her own
or private.
Private. So that's why the point was that it's a given situation. Even her mother says, you have to adjust. And her brother says, you have to adjust. I mean, he's otherwise a good guy. Why are you walking out on him? So that's, I think, and I've read somewhere that the more positive response to that film came from men than from women.
Oh, really?
Yes. I don't know where you come across this. Yeah, because many women also, brought up in a more traditional way. To keep the family going, you have to accept, overlook certain, that conditioning. The mother is conditioned to that, and she tries to pass on the conditioning to the daughter. She listens quietly but doesn't argue that much with the mother. The father is the more understanding character. So this is like, you're individualizing the situation. You're individualizing the characters of not just the main protagonist, but also the supporting cast.
Yeah.
And one thing I notice now that many of the smaller films being made in Hindi, the families, they're not like the generic aunt, the generic cousin, with no individual individuation. So now I find that when people wrote